Welcome to Democrats of Greater Tucson. My name is Larry Bodine. I'm also the president. We have a wonderful speaker today, Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. Wave hello to everybody, Stephanie. I'll introduce you as soon as we get through a few announcements. Why don't we start with you, Kathy? Tell us about membership.
Okay, I'll be glad to. Hello, everyone. I sure hope you enjoyed your Labor Day last week. As you know, I'm going to ask you, if you haven't yet joined, you be sure to go ahead and join. Stephanie and I talked about it just 3 or 4 minutes ago, and she said, yep, she's going to join. Stephanie knows to just go to the DGT.org and click on join, and Act Blue is right there. If you don't want to join via Act Blue, then you can just look up the P.O. box for the DGT and send your check to the DGT and mail it to the P.O. box. It's quite a deal for only $20. So thanks, everybody. Glad you're here with us.
Thanks so much, Kathy.
You bet.
Let's turn now to Christina Early, who organized our last happy hour. It was a wonderful event. And we've got another one coming up, isn't that right? In about 2 weeks?
Yes, that's correct. We are scheduled for September the 29th. We're going to be at our original spot at Augustine's Kitchen in the Mercado downtown on Congress, just west of I-10. They were so gracious the first couple of times we were there. They're welcoming us back again. Once again, we won't have any kind of a server in the banquet room that they're allowing us to use at no cost to us. And we will have to order our food and drinks from the bar, but everybody seems to have handled that okay the last few times that we were there. And if you want to register, you can click on that registration link. So far, we only have 4 people signed up, and 2 of them are Steve and I. So we need everybody out there to register so we can give the restaurant an idea of how many people are coming, and all the information about the event, directions and so forth is in that registration link. So I hope everybody will be there. It's a good time, and it's great to be able to talk to people. Thanks, Larry.
I couldn't agree more. Looking forward to the next happy hour. Let's turn now to Sandy Binion, our program director on the board. Sandy, what have you got lined up for us?
Coming up next week, we have Reginald Boulding, who is a candidate for the Arizona Secretary of State. A Democrat, of course. All of these are Democrats. And the following week, we have Charlie Fisher. He is the executive director of Arizona Democratic Party. And he will be telling us a lot about what goes on at the very top. And then the following week, we're going to have Nathan Davis, who has announced that he is a candidate for Randy Freese's vacated as a state rep in what is presently LD9, and that's what's coming up. So hopefully everybody will join us to hear all those, and I'm looking forward to listening to Stephanie.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the hard work you do to get the wonderful speakers that we have. And speaking of that, let me give a quick introduction to Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, who is our speaker today. Stephanie was elected state representative in LD10 in 2020. And today she is running for the state Senate seat in LD10, which was formerly occupied by Kirsten Engel. Stephanie was born in Flagstaff, and she spent her childhood years on Navajo tribal lands. After completing her master's degree in divinity at Princeton Theological Seminary, Stephanie and her husband Derek made Tucson their home. Stephanie is an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA and is currently serving as parish associate at St. Mark's. Stephanie served on the Tucson School District's Family Life Curriculum Committee, and she dedicated hundreds of hours reviewing and revising the curriculum. Stephanie was the regional lead for Save Our Schools, working to successfully defeat the 2017 school voucher expansion. And finally, Progress Arizona has named her one of the most progressive legislators in Arizona. So congratulations, Stephanie. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, DGT, for asking me to come and speak today. While my time leading up to being elected in the legislature took place over the better part of a decade, boy, oh boy, have I learned so much in the last 8 months, having served 6 of those in our state legislature. This past year, as you all know, because I know most of you folks are engaged and you follow very closely what's going on at the state level, this was a bruising year. It was quite the year for me to cut my teeth, but nonetheless, I am exactly where I need to be and in serving my LD and the people of the state of Arizona. And I'm very, very grateful and thankful that the voters saw fit to elect me, and look forward to continuing to serve many years in our state legislature. And I just thought, maybe for those of you who don't know me, Larry, I appreciate the background and letting folks know that I am from Arizona. I grew up here. I've spent quite a bit of my time living and camping all over this state. There are very few places I haven't explored or have been to, but Arizona's home. This is where my heart resides. This is where I chose to raise my family. My kids are coming up. It's up to them where they decide to live. But I have to tell you, I want Arizona to be a place where they want to be. And I want to know that we have the resources for them to have a bright future. It is because of my children and parenting them and helping them navigate their childhood years, their teen years, and my oldest now into his adult years, helping them navigate, that I realized our state for many, many years has been balancing its budget on the backs of our children. And so that was the impetus for me for running for the state legislature. And for a lot of you, you know that I ran on a platform of education and healthcare. I was so excited when I got elected and I put in my committee requests. And then I was promptly appointed to the Government and Elections Committee and the Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committee. And I have to tell you, what a critical year to be serving on those committees. Our headlines for the last 3 months have been screaming about our water and our water tables throughout the state. How many summers do we have to endure these incredible mega fires, forest fires? Our natural environment, our natural world, we are suffering the effects of climate change in our state. And so that Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committee is such a critical committee to be on, because if we do not have clean air to breathe and we don't have enough water, none of the other policies make any sense, except for, and that brings me to our Government and Elections Committee. We cannot begin to put in and enact laws that are going to protect our state in the ways of water and clean up our forests and manage them correctly and address climate change in all the ways that we need to do that, unless we flip at least one chamber in our legislature and we grab the governor's seat. Now, I think we stand a pretty good chance of getting the governor's chair, and I think we stand a pretty good chance of getting parity or flipping the state house, and we're awfully doggone close in the Senate. And the reason I say these things is that there is a power dynamic, and Larry and I, as people were jumping on, we touched on this a little bit. There's a power dynamic there in that all of the committees are stacked in such a way that the Republicans never need the Democrats' votes on bills. And if they don't have their Republican votes, they don't run those bills. And so we need to flip a chamber, because then that flips the power dynamic. And then we have the ability to start putting in place laws that are going to help our state, laws that are going to protect the most vulnerable among us, laws that are going to address criminal justice reform, all these things that we as Democrats and in our party value. The fact that we want to promote human life and protect and uplift it. Well, at any rate, so we flipped those chambers. And like I said earlier, I had no idea just how important those two committees were going to be, until I got at them and then saw the onslaught of the bills that we were facing this session. And I will tell you right now that our freedom to vote, our free and fair elections are under attack. And you all know this. You know, it's in the headlines. It's what we're talking about. It's why we have so many referendums. We've got 8 or 9 petitions we're circulating, asking for signatures. And I'll pause and just give you all some kudos, because down here in Pima County, what's happening this interim time is a very heavy lift. And from what I can tell and the people I'm speaking with, Pima County is doing a major part of that heavy lift. We are organizing, we are hustling. We're working hard to make sure that we can undo some of the damage that was done in this past legislative session. And in regards especially to those bills that are attacking our freedom to vote. Those bills that are going to get in the way and are being used as a distraction to throw us off our game of flipping a chamber and getting the governor's seat. A lot of this is meant to be, the bills that were passed were meant to be roadblocks and distractions so that we don't keep our focus and our energy where it needs to go. Let me just step through 3 of the voting bills that are so important, that are the referendums, the petitions that we're asking people to sign, because these truly are critical. And the first one is SB 1485, and that's better known just in general as the Pevel Purge. That's where our permanent early voting list was attacked this last legislative session, and it was made into an active early voting list as opposed to permanent early voting list. And so now we've, in this state, nothing is permanent. And if folks, for whatever life reason, interrupts their ability to vote, there is a potential for them to be purged from that list. And that's a barrier. That is a roadblock to our voting freedoms. The second is House Bill 2569. And that relates to funding our free and fair elections. In 2020, when COVID hit and folks in the state were scrambling to make sure we were still getting out the vote and still making sure that voting was free, fair, and accessible, I believe our governor declined federal funds to help make that happen because extra measures needed to be taken. And so then there were private grants that were secured to help our county recorders' offices do their jobs, the jobs they were elected to do. And that Government and Elections Committee in the House of Representatives, which, by the way, is a newly it's just a newly formed committee. And the intent for that committee was to take a hit at our voter rights, to start suppressing people's ability to vote, to take away those freedoms. So this committee was just newly formed, and it was with that intent. And so part of that, one of the bills we saw was House Bill 2569, and that has completely eliminated any private funding in the form of grants for bringing in extra resources so our county recorders can do their jobs. Through COVID, it was so very important. More people needed to, more hands on deck. We know that over 80% of folks in Arizona mailed in their ballots and they were processed early on, and they, our county recorders could not keep up with everything, so they had to bring in more people to help process those ballots. Well, I find it really interesting that we cannot have private money to help our county recorders do their jobs, but we can have millions of private funding come in to pay for a fraudulent audit. Right there, when you start looking at the landscape, that tells you that House Bill 2569 is just an attempt to keep us distracted. It's not about the private money. It's about restricting people's access to the ballot box, to being able to cast their votes. And then the last one was the budget reconciliation bill. And this year, when they finally rammed through the budget, there was so much policy that was put in those budget reconciliation bills, and that is unconstitutional. Budget is supposed to be about the budget. You are not supposed to add in multiple different pieces of policy. And in Budget Reconciliation Bill 1891, that is a potpourri of really bad ideas. Within there are three things, and this referendum for 1819 is addressing the fact that bill stripped Katie Hobbs, our Secretary of State, of her power to do her job. And it was directed directly at Katie Hobbs. They said the Secretary of State, and it's only until the end of 2022, which means whatever they're doing to strip her of her power then just disappears at the end of her term. So that was a direct hit on Katie Hobbs, and that was because she intervened for our Navajo Nation because there was some controversy about their ballots and signatures and being able to go in and cure ballots and having that all happen within a certain time frame. And the law that was there, or the decision, was restrictive, and Katie, under her power as Secretary of State, said, no, we will give them the time that they need to cure their ballots. And in retaliation, that's when she got stripped of her power. The second really bad idea that's been put into Budget Reconciliation Bill 1819 is where we register voters. And now they've opened it up to game and fish, so that people can register to vote at Game and Fish. Now, that might seem like, oh, we're making voter registration much more acceptable or accessible. But let's think about what happens at Game and Fish. We go there for our fishing licenses and our hunting licenses. And I'm just going to put that out there and let you connect the dots. We can have a conversation, about that. Probably offline is a little bit better. And then the last, and this one for me is even the most concerning of Budget Reconciliation Bill 1819. And that is that now they're wanting to put an ID mark on ballots. And that ID mark no longer keeps our ballots private, all of that information. And it will also have the effect of giving outside groups access to voter registration lists. And that is so very disconcerting to me. Our freedom to vote and our access to free and fair elections is under attack. And so these referendums are so important that we get these signatures and we take this back to the voters, because that's the only recourse we have right now until we can flip the legislature and flip the power dynamic in order to be able to do something about this. Now, one of the other concerning things that happened this last legislative session, and certainly what's been happening in the Texas legislature, really mirrors a lot of what's going on in Arizona. And for me, Senate Bill 1457, which is one of the most restrictive anti-abortion bills, was passed this year. And I think, again, there are lots of pieces to this bill, but one of the most concerning things for me, and the most troubling and dangerous, is that within that bill, the law is trying to establish, or they're trying to create a law that establishes personhood of a fetus at conception. And where that is problematic is if that goes into effect September 29th, then that will pave the way for just a flat out no more abortions. We will abolish abortions, and anybody who performs, aids, consults, anything regarding abortion, then that I think will face a manslaughter charge. So this is very concerning. And the thing that caught my ear on all of this, because we know that this is medical care. This is access to treatment, medical care. It is reproductive rights. This is between a person and their physician. Now, sometimes people consult clergy, and from what I understand, the law that got passed in Texas, if a clergy person even consults with one of their parishioners, they can be arrested. And I just think, are we in the business of incarcerating our doctors and our clergy? Is this what we want? So, I mean, that's the outflow of all of this. But going back to establishing personhood at conception, it really is very, very troubling. And so, thank you, Robert. It puts women who have miscarriages at risk of prosecution as well. So, there's a lot that's happening. Now, I will tell you, in regards to SB 1457, litigation was filed August 17th by a couple of partner organizations. And right now we're hoping for and working towards an injunction before September 29th. So we knew this was going to end up in the courts. It's unfortunate, but that's where we are. So all of that to say, it was a wild ride in the legislature this year. I certainly learned so much, but on the other hand, I've learned and just know that, the power of having a voice and a vote is so very important up there. But what we are doing down here on the ground, the face-to-face conversations, these referendums are fantastic because it gets us out talking to our neighbors, to our friends, to strangers whom we would never probably approach and talk to them about politics. This helps us create a more engaged voter and increases our voter population for people who register and who actually show up. I had a conversation with my one of my children the other day. They saw a bumper sticker, and it was a political bumper sticker. And my child looked at me and said, "Would you ever put that on your car?" And I said, "I probably wouldn't, but I have to tell you, it used to be in polite society. We didn't talk about politics and we didn't talk about religion. You kept things nice. But in this day and age, we can't afford to keep things nice." And I applaud that person for speaking up. And our freedoms in this country can no longer afford to be silent or quiet. There is so much at stake right here. So let's talk about it. One of the simplest things that a person can do to engage voters and to increase voter turnout, it's really simple, is ask somebody if they plan to vote, or tell them, "I voted. Are you going to vote? Did you vote?" And that might feel like putting somebody on the spot, but that is the biggest driver of getting people to show up. It's a simple question. Did you vote? Are you going to vote? I appreciate Larry talking about what the state party is doing, because now is the time for us to stay focused. Now is the time for us to stay on track, to continue to organize. It's a grind. It's a grind to organize and to reach out and to continue to try to find folks who haven't registered to vote and encourage people to vote, to become engaged. But I can tell you, as that young mom who was so excited about sending her child off to school so I could join my first PTO meeting, I can tell you that level of engagement starting at the PTO as my children grew, and the more I learned, and the more I shared, my friends started turning to me, wanting to know, well, who are you voting for and why? I didn't have to ask them the questions. They started asking me. And I went from a mom who was sending her child to school, wanting to get engaged at the very local level, to being able to talk about a whole range of policies and candidates with my friends so that we could make good choices, electing folks who will go in and help lead our state in the direction that they need to be. And it's just a simple conversation, a simple question, and then just showing up. So I think I'm going to stop there because I'm sure folks have questions for me. I do want to say thank you for your time. I am happy to be here. I'm happy to be in the fight. And I'll take a breath right now.
All right, thank you so much, Stephanie. Very inspiring. I overlooked an announcement and would like to call on Susie Anderson, who has an announcement. Susie, go right ahead.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Stephanie, so much for being here and giving us the information you have. It's just so teeth clenching to think about what they are trying to do up there. Like you said, we have to get together, we have to organize, and I wanted to tell everybody that the Women's March will be held here in Tucson, and I want you all to join. It will start from Armory Park at 10 a.m. on the 2nd of October. That's a Saturday. And we'll gather there and then march up to the library. Okay, I don't know if many of you remember 2017, 2019. I mean, we need to do this. We need to tell them that we women and the men who love us and respect us want us to have our own choices for our own bodies. Thank you, Larry.
Well, thank you. Let's turn to Shirley Muni.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of television commercials, I guess, in favor of right to work laws. They're saying, small business owners like me will have their employers forced to join a union. Is there a proposition? I haven't heard of one.
So, that's a really good question. We don't watch a lot of television in our house, but the other night we were watching a movie or TV show and that commercial came on and I had some explaining to do to my children. But that's what they're pushing back against is at the federal level. And that's the PRO Act that we're hearing about up in DC, allowing states to have unions and for people to join unions. It's to really kind of push back against the for the right to work states where there aren't worker protections. So yes, but it's at the federal level. And so I think I've only stepped through the particulars of the PRO Act once, and I probably need to go back through and do that again. But it really is something that is putting out protections for our workers and pushing back against the right to work laws. It's very misleading for sure, which is why I said I had a lot of explaining to do to my children.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Steve Early. Steve, go right ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you. It was very great. The legislature also screwed the Indian reservations this year by legalizing gambling statewide. Is there anything going on to try to get that reversed?
Not that I know of, is a simple answer. I think what made that bill very complex was that it came through the tribes and our relationship in the state with our tribes and the sovereignty of these tribal nations really made that bill hard. It received quite a bit of Democratic support, and that was because a lot of us were following the lead of the tribal leaders. We had reached out and we spoke to tribal leaders and wanted to do everything we can to help support them. But there were parts of that bill that we were not able to get around. And I at this point, before it went into effect, I do know that there was a lawsuit to try to stop it, and it didn't go anywhere. So there was a lawsuit that had been filed, and the courts decided there was no grounds. And so that's why we now have the sports betting in Arizona
Can
with
it be
that huge
repealed?
big gaming contract.
Can it be repealed in the future?
I think anything can be repealed in the future, but it's going to require, what I would like to be able to do would be to be able to kind of take a scalpel in there and not have everything mushed together in one big gaming contract. I really do want to protect our tribes here. And so I certainly think nothing should be done without tribal leaders leading the way. And an agreement had been made, and at the last minute, the governor tried to break the agreement with the tribes and go around the agreements in the compact. So there are many layers here, and so I quite honestly was angry and horrified that the governor had given the tribes his word and then turned around and tried to go behind them and undo everything that was put into that agreement. So I think for me personally, I'd like to take a scalpel in there and kind of scoop out some of it, but nothing should be done without the leadership coming from the tribes first.
We have a question from Susie Anderson. Go right ahead, Susie.
Oh, Stephanie, I've been following you since you were on the board for TUSD on the sex education. How do we fight against the lies that Shirley pointed out, that, or not necessarily lies, but misinformation? We need to keep our eyes open and ears open to advertisements that give a false sense of what a person is doing. Do you have any suggestions for how we do that?
Well, first of all, I think first and foremost, follow the money. See who's paying for those ads. See which groups, because there's a lot of money coming behind those, and some of it is, hopefully, all depending on who's funding and where the commercials are coming from, that there can be some counter arguments. But again, for me, I think if we can't get funding for media, again, op-eds in the newspaper, get somebody to write about it if you've got connections with folks in the media. The other thing is, it's again and again, it's us engaging, having those conversations. And I know that sounds like a broken record, but sometimes, I don't know, it's hard to compete with the big money that is coming in with some of these groups. I would really be curious to see who funded the Anti-Pro Act commercials. And then honestly, I think that's where you start punching back, is with the big groups and exposing where the funding's coming from. Because for a lot of us, if we hear Americans for Prosperity, we immediately know where funding is coming from and we know how to punch back. So start there. Start with who's putting the commercials, who's funding it. It looks like Sandy's got his hand up, or Maureen, one of the two.
Do I remember right that Ducey took something like 14 million from the rescue plan and dumped it into vouchers on the grounds that parents could pull their kids because school districts were protecting kids? These for-profit charter schools, they don't care as long as they get the 7,000. And part B of that, any of the Dems working with outside lawyers to sue on the abuse of the rescue funds?
Yes and yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I think a lot, the budget reconciliation bills they're still sifting through all of that and seeing, but a lot of lawsuits have been filed. A lot of litigation is happening. And I just read something this morning about the governor taking the money for the rescue plan dollars and throwing it into vouchers. Nothing makes my blood boil faster than the continual hit our public education system takes from the majority and the ways in which public school teachers, the profession, has been undermined in this state, and what that does for our families and for our children. And then, yeah, as far as the litigation, I was following for a little bit, but I, at this point, haven't been able to keep track of where all of that stuff is. But yes, a lot of lawsuits have been filed.
Thank you.
Susie, I see your hand. Are you still?
Yeah. Oh, I have all kinds of questions, mostly like, how do we get to voters in other areas who, like LD10, Prescott, Scottsdale? Scottsdale will never be able to undo, I'm afraid. There are lots of people who seem to be able to elect really bad actors. How do we reach out? I mean, I'm not worried about Tucson. Tucson's a really good place to live. We've got reasonable people here, but throughout the state, it's much more difficult. How do we reach others to show them that our way is a better way?
Well, I think what you're talking about first and foremost is the divide that we are seeing. And it's not a clustering around the middle and the tension. We're seeing an extreme divide. We're seeing almost a polarization, and that's what we're facing in the legislature. The numbers being so close, I thought, oh, this will be good. There'll be more leverage. We'll be able to wheel and deal a little bit. And the effect of the margins being so slim has had the effect of pushing us to the extremes. And right now, what's really troubling is that the most extreme in the Republican caucus will withhold their votes on bills unless they get exactly what they want. And they figured out how to leverage their party. They don't need our votes. So what I've looked at and taken from that is, oh my goodness, we really are, divided in almost extreme ways. And so some of this, the thinking about them and thinking about us and where we stand and where they stand, you almost have to move beyond that type of thinking and truly find the places where the connect is and say, where can I meet this person and where can they meet me, on ideas, on topics. And that's where you find your leverage, but it has to be a shared trust in order to have any kind of leverage. The Republicans don't need to trust us right now because they don't need our votes. But the moment that they do need our votes, then you start a different type of a relationship. But right now, because they hold all the power. So some of this and how we shift that, and you're right, it's through our elections and it's through who we elect. Now, these referendums are a great way to start conversations, to talk about the policies that affect us, and to talk about them in such a way where we realize what is at stake. So if we can focus in on policy and start having the conversations and being able to point out what's detrimental in some of these, and it's trying to find those places where we connect and then being able to use that as the jumping off point to engage. And I think that's a much harder process. It takes time. But I believe if we stay the course, these referendums, I will tell you something. So Prop 208 was our Invest in Ed initiative statewide, in 2020. And the voters said, we want this money to go into our education system. And so, of course, there's all this stuff to repeal all of that. I was invited to sit in on a Zoom. It was a webinar type thing where I was told that pretty much it was laid out that the Democrats have figured out how to use the referendum to their advantage to make the will of the voters heard, and therefore it's not working the way it was supposed to work, and we need to change our referendum and citizens initiative process. So here, this is the thing. We have figured it out because we have figured out it's those conversations, it's that engagement, it's that everyday human connection of explaining what's going on in the way of the policies that are being crafted and how they're going to affect us at the everyday level. I think so. That's where we got to start. I have to say, when I was able to knock doors and canvas and be face to face, and as I was first getting out there in the fall of 2019, getting my signatures to run for the state house, it was just on the heels of our city elections. And I was so amazed that I would, knock on the door, ring a doorbell, somebody would come and I would say who I was and what I was running for, and would they please, sign to get me on the ballot. And immediately the conversation went one of two places. One was immediately to talk about Martha McSally and how awful she was, which is at the federal level. And then the other was to talk about our city roads, which is at the city level. And I would engage, but I said, well, the state, focuses on this. And what I was learning just, anecdotally from going door to door, a lot of people do not realize the power that the state legislature has to shape our everyday lives. And so that's the piece. A lot of people in our district, in my district, don't even know who I am. And when I call up and say, hey, this is Representative Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, who are you? I'm your elected representative at the state legislature. So some of this too is, again, it goes back to that voter engagement. It goes back to promoting our civic duty, our civic responsibility. It goes back to not being impolite society, but caring about the communities that we are a part of and hoping to, make better. So yeah, Susie, that's a roundabout answer, but I can tell you we've got to get away from the them against us and find the places where we do connect so that we can push for a different way.
Kind of a blue sky question. If in fact we take the governorship and hey, maybe both houses of the legislature in 22, what are your priorities going to be moving forward with the Democratic majority? What are you going to be fighting for?
Yay, thank you for that question. I will start off with focusing on our water resources. What a surprise it was to find out that natural resources, energy, and water was such a good fit for me. I could not be more pleased to have been placed on that committee. And I have spent the better part of this interim in a lot of water meetings. And I just was up in Flagstaff this weekend and was able to walk down one of the troubled flooding spots, from the effects of a fire they had 2 years ago, so I certainly am learning as much as I can about water policy, water law here in the state of Arizona, seeing where the pressure points are. I find I find that I'm really captured by it, and my family really would like for me to stop talking about water in Arizona, but I can't. And so I think I am going to eventually start nerding out about that. But with that, I would like to certainly dig in more to our infrastructure to throughout the state to see us make more moves for clean energy, renewable, sustainable energy. That is definitely including electric charging stations throughout the state, as well as solar. There's so much more work to be done in that arena. There's so much more for me to learn. But then also seeing, the ways in which there are things that we can do within our own communities to help mitigate some of the effects of climate change. So first and foremost, I certainly concerned about the environment, and that is where a lot of my energy and passion will go. And again, like I said earlier, until, if we don't have clean air to breathe and we don't have enough water, none of the other policies that we have really matter. and especially after we flip a chamber and have the governor's chair. I think, boy, we need to lean in and go. The other, obviously, education is still so very near and dear to my heart, and certainly education policy, education funding. I've spent the better part of 8 years really just digging in and learning and out there stumping, 305 to repeal the voucher expansion. And so anytime I get an opportunity to work on any of that stuff, I again come alive. And so I really will be that person, just continuing to, go on and on and on about education until we get there. I would love to see from the droolers and crawlers all the way up through college. Certainly we've got to reverse the damage we've done in the way of funding for our community colleges and our universities. But, we got to pour into our earliest and continue all the way through. There's certainly more to do there. And again, a lot of you who followed me on the campaign trail know that accessible, affordable healthcare has been something that's been a real challenge for my family. Now it's been 18 years that we've been in Tucson. Thankfully, being elected to the legislature, that came with benefits, and that is not a worry for my family right now, for me, and providing that for my family, but that is not the case throughout the state. And so that's something that I definitely will continue to put time and energy into as well. I certainly want to continue to be a champion for kids' care. And then I think there are other issues, certainly sensible gun safety laws is something that I'm pretty passionate about, but I also know that one of the more critical things that I just think it's going to get way worse before it gets any better is housing in Arizona. I still think we're still facing a tsunami of evictions. We certainly don't have enough affordable housing. There's a lot that needs to be addressed in that arena. So, and I could go on and on, but these are some of the areas that grab me, that I'm passionate about, and will throw lots of energy into creating relationships, finding the stakeholders and the partners. And I think one of the things, especially in the realm of our young people, that I was blindsided by last session, and that's the attack on our LGBTQ youth, especially our trans kids and our non-binary children. And there's an extra burden placed on our families who have trans children and non-binary kids, and I was a little bit blindsided by that. And in the aftermath of having the session, I just decided I'm tired of playing defense when it comes to our children. And so I have been starting to pull together stakeholders to look at things that we can shift or changes that we can make in regards to putting in protections, especially for our trans and our non-binary youth. It just horrifies me that we have adults elected to office who act like bullies, and especially when it comes to our children.
Yeah. Sounds like your heart is in the right place when it comes to state government, because, most of what they do is health, education, and, protecting people's rights. Kudos to you. Looks like Barbara Warren had a question to drill down further on water. She doesn't have a microphone. She wants to know what more we can do at the state level about PFAS, the forever chemicals in our groundwater that we recently discovered here in Tucson.
Barbara, that's an excellent question. I haven't... part of what I've been learning, I haven't started stepping through that, but I can imagine at the state level, and especially working with the Arizona Department of Water Resources, certainly I think there are testing requirements that we can put in. And somewhere in there, I think folks who leak into our waterways certainly have to be responsible for cleaning up. And if they're not, then that is absolutely something we can do at the state level, is get requirements in for cleaning up our waters. Now, I know that there's been a lot of shifts here and there. In Arizona, we have what is called ephemeral streams, which is they're dry riverbeds or dry beds that there's not always water running. But when we have a water event like monsoons, then you've got water that runs. And in the past, there has been practices where people have dumped in those ephemeral streams when they've been dry beds, and all of that has gone into our waters, which is very, very problematic. And so, yes, I think there probably is something that we can do. Now, mind you, it does have to be in concert with either the county or the city. And by all means, I'm happy to have a collaborative effort there. But you're absolutely right. I think if polluting is happening and we know where it's coming from, then the guilty parties should be responsible for cleaning that up as well. And I think those laws can be put into the books for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the PFASs are in our groundwater.
They're in our, oh, okay. So within the groundwater. Yeah, no, I think that's laws to clean it up. Our groundwater is, different parts of the state of Arizona, and Barbara knows this. We've got 5 management areas that have certain protections.
Active management areas, yeah.
And we use different parts of our water in Arizona, but in our rural areas, there are no protections. And so we have a lot of indiscriminate groundwater pumping. And folks are relying on that groundwater to create sustainability, and it is not sustainable. Where our groundwater goes, there are pockets within the earth, and that water and the pressure of the water moving through keeps those pockets open. And when we drain those and our aquifers, it has the effect of collapsing, which does then create those fissures that we're seeing and, we're reading about it in the newspaper. And so, there's a lot that we need to do to protect our groundwater, and we're trying. I introduced legislation in the spring in the budget process. I went and put an amendment in there because everybody was shoving policy in. I thought, well, let's do this. And that was to start a way of problem solving the lack of regulation and monitoring in our rural areas. I got shut down pretty fast, but we got it on the books that we're going to continue to try. But I do want to learn more about how the PFAS are getting into our groundwater. And certainly, Barbara, you and I probably should have a conversation about that. And certainly we'll see what we can do to introduce legislation to make sure we can clean a lot of that up.
Yeah, Barbara just pointed out to me via direct message that pollution coming from the military base and the airport here in Tucson. And she says the U.S. government needs to be held accountable to pay for cleanup, which of course is a heavy lift if they don't want to.
Well, nobody, how hard it is to take responsibility for our actions, and especially if we have to dig into our pockets and pay, right? Yeah, exactly. No, I'm happy to work on that for sure.
Well, it's approaching 1 p.m. and I don't see any further questions at this point. So I just want to thank you very much, Stephanie, for coming and joining us and participating and informing us about what you've been doing in the legislature and what your plans are. I appreciate you so much. Let's go ahead and give people an idea of what they can do to help support you and your political projects, how they contact you, how they donate to your campaign, and then we'll sign off.
Thank you so much. So I am just, thank you all for your time. Certainly you can talk me up. We are in the process of getting my campaign committee officially formatted. I was asked to speak to DGT, and I was not wanting to pass up an opportunity to engage with you all, but we are on the slow end of getting my website up in my ActBlue account right now. As your representative, you can always donate to hamiltonforhouse.com, my ActBlue. But my Senate campaign in the next couple of weeks will be up and running. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. But folks, you can also email me at hamiltonforhouse.com if you would like to be able to volunteer on my campaign. We will be getting started within the month. And I will be out collecting signatures. Well, whatever, please just reach out to me. My phone number is 520-623-1980. You can call me. I am available to you. I take my job title, representative, very seriously. I cannot know how to represent unless I know what you need from me. So happy to be here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. And you certainly will be seeing me around.
Oh, one more question, Stephanie. Are you running traditional or running clean? Do you need $5 qualification donation?
No, I will be running traditional.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but thank you for that. I support running clean, and I have hopes that
It's
we
very difficult to do,
eventually will
though.
be able to get there where everybody can run clean.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to thank everybody for coming and joining DGT today. One last pitch. If you haven't become a member, do please become a member. It's only $20 a year. And now we're going to sign off this session of DGT.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks again, Stephanie.
Thank you.